It's very clear, just going off of Google Trends for an example, that stablecoins are being talked about everywhere, and a lot of people are actually looking stablecoins up to learn more about them. The big thing that I really want to address here is that with legislation and with more and more discussions happening around stablecoins from the government officials and even more moves happening from big banks, stablecoins are only going to become much bigger. And that's why we have to pay attention to this. But also, what this really is telling us is that we are witnessing the evolution of our financial system. And blockchain is the key behind all of this. Now, let's actually go and look at what happened in the month of June alone for stablecoins. And I'm just going to pick a few things out. Number one, big players like Apple, X, Airbnb, and even Google are in early talks with crypto firms to explore stablecoin integration. This was a big one to really kind of solidify that almost every enterprise player out there, almost every big player is going to be looking into stablecoins. We already know Amazon and Walmart are also looking into stablecoins. Visa and MasterCard, I'm just waiting on them to announce it, right? Because we already know that they're also going to be exploring stablecoins. It just makes a lot of sense. So this will probably continue to be a much, much bigger deal. But on top of that, big banks, right? Deutsche Bank is exploring stablecoins and tokenized deposits, including its own token, or joining an industry initiative. Now, we know that industry initiative did include a few other big players. We know Citi was working with Bank of America, JP Morgan, and I think Wells Fargo was on that one. I might be wrong on the Wells Fargo name, but I do know that major banks are actually looking into tokenizing deposits. And even more recently, we do know that JP Morgan announced JPMD, which is technically a stablecoin by, market standards, but it's actually a deposit token. And this was actually on Base. Now, what's interesting about this, right, is it kind of reminds me back to what I said, and this goes back to August of 2023. So this is 2 years ago. I said, how do I envision what's coming? Every single major nation will have their own currency. CBDCs will be this currency. Every single bank will tokenize their reserve. They might even have their own token, i.e. JPM coin. Guess what? We have JPMD. The world is going to be dominated by digital monies. Anything and everything of value will eventually be tokenized in time. The biggest thing about the global financial system is that we are moving towards a world that is not dominated by a currency controlled by one entity. Decentralization on a global scale is 100% needed. The US dollar has been a great example of why we should not have a reserve currency. The interesting thing about CBDCs is that they eliminate the need for a reserve currency, but would 100% demand a decentralized bridge currency. Many believe that this bridge currency will be XRP or even XLM. Due to many documents out there, I believe there is a significant change coming where the world will be dominated by DLNs, distributed ledger networks. Whether or not it's XRP and XLM, etc., the world is changing. Everyone needs to realize that blockchain and DLT is fundamental to the change coming. The biggest thing to do is diversify into utility giants in this space and be patient enough to realize the vision. And listen, this is happening. Stablecoins, regardless of what everyone says, they are CBDCs. Stablecoins are, programmable. They're on-chain, they're trackable, they're traceable. So when we think about CBDCs and stablecoins, there's not that big of a difference. And I've talked about this on multiple occasions. The thing about CBDCs is that they could easily be just a digital dollar. It could be a digital euro. Now, are we going to see CBDCs being announced by central banks as well? They will probably announce their own token. And then, of course, we will have stablecoins to go off of, which we already do have access to them. Like, for an example, ROUSD. Now, the crazy thing about the big banks is that, every single bank will have their own reserves, their own tokenized reserves. This is a deposit token. JPMD is that deposit token. And when we think about what JP Morgan is doing, right, like JP Morgan has to be focused on because they're setting the standard essentially for the big banks. That's why Deutsche Bank also doing this is very interesting. At the same exact time that Fireblocks actually recently put out a great report regarding their State of Stablecoins 2025 report, showing that 49% of institutions globally use stablecoins for payments, with 41% piloting or planning. This is real progress building the future of finance. So yeah, all of the big institutional players and most of the big banks are actually ready for stablecoins. They want to utilize stablecoins. They've been urging the SEC to get something passed through so that they could tap into crypto payments. We know this is true because of Bank of America. So when we think about this, this is telling us that the big change is coming. It's no longer, just something that we could speculate about. No, this is actually happening. And it's something that we saw, years ago, going all the way back to even 2021. Now, if we go back to May, towards the end of May, Scott Bessent said that stablecoins could create $2 trillion of demand for US treasuries. We are going big on digital assets. This is what Scott Bessent said. Check this out.
If really we went big into stablecoin in this country, what effect could that have on the strength of the dollar? Because people might have to hold dollars in order to match against it, or even for treasuries.
Well, we are going big on digital assets. So Trump administration has made digital assets a priority. Past administration starved and almost made extinct a lot of these companies and pushed it offshore. So what we want to do is apply the highest U.S. regulatory and AML standards to digital assets, especially stablecoins. And I've seen estimates that just over the short term, stablecoins could create $2 trillion of demand for U.S. treasuries and treasury bills. To put that in context, the number is probably about $300 billion right now.
If really we went.
So yeah, I mean, listen, stablecoins are really at the top priority, if you will, from this admin currently. On top of that, digital assets, right? Because we have to get behind this. This is 100% crucial for the US to get behind at the same exact time that almost every single nation is also trying to get behind this space. For an example, the UK, the UAE, China is now addressing this openly, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But on top of this, we also know that, Scott Bessent recently said that crypto is not a threat to the dollar. In fact, stablecoins can reinforce dollar supremacy. They have been ignored by national governments for far too long. Now, to really kind of build on top of this, this is exactly what Scott Bessent did say. And he did say this during an interview as well. We have crypto is not a threat to the dollar. In fact, stablecoins can reinforce dollar supremacy. Digital assets are one of the most important phenomena in the world right now, yet they have been ignored by national governments for far too long. This administration is committed to establishing the United States as a hub for digital asset innovation, and the Genius Act moves us one step closer to that goal. Check this out.
There's a new book called King Dollar, a journalist who's followed Treasury for about 40 years.
Yeah.
And he talks about every time there was a narrative that the U.S. was going to lose reserve currency status, why it's never happened.
Mm-hmm.
And
because crypto, that seems to be a threat to the dollar, doesn't it?
I think it's the opposite.
Oh, really?
I think stable coins could reinforce dollar supremacy, because with stable coins could end up being one of the largest buyers of U.S. treasuries or T-bills.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, if you are using a stable coin in Nigeria that's backed by the US dollar, you don't actually have to have dollars. It's on your phone. You can transact. So I think there's a very good chance that crypto is actually one of the things that locks in dollar supremacy.
And is that why it was crucial that Donald Trump get involved in crypto rather than trying to constrain it like Joe Biden was?
I think constrain's too mild a word. I think make it extinct.
Oh.
So this administration's commitment to digital assets, it's innovation, because there's so many other things that happen around digital assets. And also, it's one of those things that it's one of the most important phenomena that's happening in the world, and the U.S. just ignored it.
And yeah, this is also another reason why the US is trying to accelerate stablecoin adoption, and also legislation behind stablecoins to really kind of enable the adoption. It's because they want to flood the global system with digital dollars. They want to make sure that, the US is behind this initially, so that they could get the US dollar on chain and retain that supremacy. They want the dollar to still be that dominant currency. I'm not too sure if this is going to last forever, especially with all of these other nations wanting to launch their own stablecoins or their own digital assets. It's definitely going to be interesting to see, but I do think that the race is on for pretty much everyone to get, stablecoins out there pegged to their own fiat currency. Now, on top of this, right, to really kind of confirm this, we have over here, so update, Chair of China's National Institution for Finance and Development, Li Yang, says stablecoins extend US dollar power. Calls for RMB stablecoin via Hong Kong to defend monetary sovereignty. On top of this, we have over here, just in, Central Bank of China governor says blockchain accelerates the development of stablecoins and the transformation of cross-border payments, reshaping traditional systems with instant settlement while posing new regulatory challenges. This is something that you have to focus on because this is 100% true. Stablecoins are driving and accelerating blockchain adoption. It's also accelerating the big shift from traditional processes to more digital blockchain-based processes. This is reshaping everything that we know around our systems at a time where ISO 20022 is almost here, and at a time where big banks are now exploring tokenization and stablecoin initiatives. The DTCC, Swift, all of these big organizations and these big names are now involved in crypto in some way, shape, or form. And what's crazy about this is here we have from payments, instant payments and stablecoins demand core banking system upgrades. Wow, you don't say. This is why I keep saying that stablecoins have to be focused on. I get that we talk about stablecoins quite often on this channel now because, well, let's just face it, stablecoins are like one of the biggest topics out there for crypto. We're basically in a stablecoin summer. But the reason why stablecoins are so important is because it is accelerating and leading into that major upgrade of the system. This is where we look back to Ripple and even XRP. Why? Well, because when we think about Ripple and XRP, what have they been really kind of focused on for years? Changing the way the traditional system works, changing the way that money moves, aka the internet of value. Now, when we actually look at this, right, there's a few highlights here. Legacy core banking systems, which were designed for batch processing and set schedules, are struggling to keep pace with the demand for instant money movement and the mainstreaming of stablecoins. A majority of financial institutions see faster payments as a must-have for new use cases. They face significant technical difficulty and the cost of integration as barriers, opening the door for packs with solutions providers. The industry is transitioning from monolithic to modular banking systems, leveraging cloud platforms and software as a service to integrate innovations. This is where we actually look at how we can connect, right? How are we connecting into these blockchain-based systems? Well, first off, we look back to FedNow, which has integrations already with blockchain-based players, which we've talked about. But also we look back to players like Volante that have Ripple already tapped in with XRP, by the way. And that's all through APIs. So the API plug and play technology is probably the best way to actually get that plug and play aspect around this technology because they don't have to actually hire IT. They don't have to change much. But it is still a major upgrade. But the core system is changing. It's upgrading. And I do think that we will eventually get to a time where the system will go down. Maybe a massive cyber attack, something similar, right? And what we will see is a relaunch of the system on chain that's fully digital. Maybe I'm speculating a little bit too much, but that's exactly how I foresee it happening. Or at least maybe we see it, one at a time. We see all the big banks jumping on, which we're already starting to kind of see now with the announcement of like JP Morgan's new deposit token and even Deutsche Bank exploring stablecoins and tokenized deposits and Citi and Bank of America and all these big banks moving on chain. On top of that though, stablecoins have to comply with ISO 20022. This is documented from, these documents, which I'll go over, Big shout out to Smoke Dog for this. Here we have the first one. We have at the bottom, ISO 20022 will modernize interbank payments on the SWIFT network with additional data fields, faster transmission speeds, and new capabilities for compliance, fraud detection, and prevention. It will adapt corresponding ISO codes for payments, which will apply to CBDCs and compliant. Big key word there is compliant stablecoins. We believe that interoperability will enable digital assets and currencies to become ubiquitous. The technology is here today, but for the full potential of DLTs to be unlocked, we will need to approach based on agreed international standards as well as mature legal and regulatory frameworks. Yeah, regulations is crucial here. But on top of that, right, we have over here on the bottom, the G20 Cross-Border Payments Program contains building blocks 14 on harmonization of ISO 20022 and 15 on harmonization of API protocols. These building blocks will cover crypto and stablecoin compatibility with ISO 20022 and adoption of API standards. There it is again, API standards. Interesting. When we think about what's going on here, okay, these stablecoin arrangements that are happening, they all require ISO compatibility, right? On top of API standards for connectivity, plug and play. A lot of these players in the space have already, built out an infrastructure that could easily be plug and played into traditional systems. Ripple is one of them. We also look at like players like Quant, which are actually enabling a lot of this as well. I think Chainlink is also doing something very similar. But at the end of the day, the key players here that have, stablecoins that are fully compliant, I look at RLUSD, I look at even Circle's USDC, which by the way, both of those stablecoins are on the XRP ledger. We could easily have all of this plug and played into the traditional system. We could actually revolutionize payments today in a very quick, way if we just got regulations for crypto. But we're probably still a few months out. I think that by the end of this year, we should start to see some legislation getting passed fully in the US for stablecoins and even market structure. And I think that by 2026, we will have full regulations for crypto. I don't think that we're too far away now from having, all of this integrated into the system. We've heard it from Scott Bessent. We've heard it from major players like even David Sachs talking about how we're getting to that point of integration with crypto into the traditional system. Ondo is doing this very similar with, for an example, the stock market, right? They want to do Wall Street 2.0. We're starting to see that convergence. The big players are already here, right? BlackRock's here, Fidelity's here, Franklin Templeton, like the big asset management companies. State Street's also looking into this. So when we think about this convergence in real time, it's happening. We just have to get past the regulatory stage, which we're kind of in right now, which is why a lot of things are still kind of boring. But I want you guys to realize that we're starting to see the big moves. All of the big players want stablecoins. They want to tap into stablecoins. This will lead to them moving on chain onto some of these great networks that we talk about almost every single day on this channel. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on because of more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, thanks for watching. Peace out.